I'm Daniel, a 38-year-old architect in Portland, married to Elise for 12 years. Our life was a canvas of quiet joys, shared coffee at dawn, her laughter over my terrible puns, and evenings sketching designs while she painted. Elise, a curator at a small gallery, had a radiance that drew people like moths. Her hazel eyes sparkled when she spoke of art, and I'd always felt lucky to be her anchor. But lately, something felt off, like a blueprint with a hidden flaw. She'd linger at gallery events, her phone buzzing late into the night. I brushed it aside. Her world was vibrant, mine methodical. Trust was our foundation. Then came the evening I found her sketchbook, usually filled with bold abstracts, now cluttered with delicate pencil drawings of a man's hands. Not mine. The lines were intimate, tracing knuckles and veins with a tenderness that stung. I confronted her gently, expecting a laugh, an explanation. "Just a study, Dan," she said, but her eyes darted away. That night, I couldn't sleep, the sketches haunting me. Who was he? A client? An artist? I started noticing her perfume lingered differently, her stories about late nights vaguer. My gut churned, but I clung to denial. Elise wouldn't betray me. Not us. I began watching her subtly, her phone left unattended, her schedule. One evening, she mentioned a client dinner at a rooftop bar downtown. I offered to join, but she waved it off, saying it was work stuff. Her smile was tight. After she left, I sat in our quiet house, the weight of doubt pressing harder. I wasn't a jealous man, but those hands in her sketchbook weren't abstract. They were real and they weren't mine. I needed answers, not accusations. So I decided to act. The rooftop bar was a sleek, glass-walled place overlooking the Willamette River. I'd never been, but Elise's client dinner gnawed at me. I told myself I was just checking in, not spying. Dressed in a dark jacket, I blended into the crowd of Portland's artsy elite. The air hummed with laughter and clinking glasses. I spotted Elise at a corner table, her auburn hair catching the fairy lights. She wore the dress I'd bought her last anniversary, its emerald fabric hugging her frame. But she wasn't alone. Across from her sat Julian, a sculptor whose work she'd curated last spring. His hands, those hands from her sketchbook, gestured animatedly, his silver rings glinting. They leaned close, her laugh too bright, his touch lingering on her wrist. My chest tightened. This wasn't a client meeting. It was a dance, intimate and deliberate. I stayed in the shadows, watching as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture she used to reserve for me. Julian's eyes held hers, and when he brushed her hand again, she didn't pull away. I wanted to storm over, demand answers, but my feet wouldn't move. Instead, I watched them leave together, her arm brushing his as they stepped into the elevator. My phone buzzed. A text from her. "Running late. Don't wait up." The lie burned. I drove home, the city blurring past. In our bedroom, her perfume lingered, mocking me. I poured a whiskey, hands shaking. Julian wasn't just a fling. He was a betrayal carved in pencil and touch. But I wouldn't confront her yet. I needed proof, a plan. Revenge wasn't my nature, but something dark stirred. She'd feel this. Days bled into weeks, and Elise's lies grew bolder. She'd return late, her excuses polished, gallery shipments, donor meetings. But I knew better. Julian's name peppered her conversations, casual yet deliberate. I started digging. Her phone, left charging one night, revealed texts. Asterisk, meet me at the studio tomorrow. Bring the blue scarf. Asterisk, the scarf I'd given her. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just emotional. It was physical, woven into her art. The betrayal wasn't standard. It was Elise pouring our marriage into sketches and stolen moments with a man who sculpted her desires. I followed her one Saturday to Julian's studio, a loft in the Pearl District. Through a window I saw them. She wore the blue scarf, laughing as he molded clay, his hands guiding hers. They didn't kiss, but their closeness screamed intimacy. She sculpted with him, their fingers entwined in wet clay, creating something together that excluded me. It was worse than I'd imagined. Not just a lover, but a partner in her creative soul, a place I thought was mine. I snapped photos, my hands trembling with rage and grief. Back home, I studied the images. The clay figure they'd made was abstract, but its curves echoed Elise's paintings. They were building a world together, one I couldn't enter. I felt erased. But I wouldn't let this destroy me. I'd expose them, not with shouting matches, but with something sharper. I started researching Julian, his exhibitions, his patrons. He thrived on reputation. I'd dismantle it, and Elise would watch her muse crumble. The cruelty of my plan took shape, fueled by her sketches and that scarf. I'm not a vengeful man, but betrayal rewrites you. Elise and Julian's connection wasn't fleeting. It was a deliberate theft of what we'd built. I couldn't unsee her hands in clay, her scarf draped over his chair. Confronting her would be too easy. She'd cry, promise change, and I'd be left hollow. No, I wanted them to feel the weight of their choices. My revenge would be surgical, rooted in their world of art and ego. I started with Julian's career. He was Portland's darling, his sculptures fetching thousands. But every artist has secrets. I hired a discreet investigator, a woman named Mara who specialized in creative types. She uncovered Julian's habit of borrowing designs from lesser-known sculptors, passing them off as his own. Not plagiarism outright, but close enough to taint him. I collected evidence, photos, emails, even a testimony from a bitter ex-assistant. My plan wasn't to sue. It was to leak this to the right people, critics, patrons, Elise's gallery. Meanwhile, I played the devoted husband. I cooked Elise's favorite risotto, asked about her day, even attended a gallery event where Julian's work was displayed. I shook his hand, my smile tight, his grip too familiar. Elise beamed, oblivious to my knowledge. That night, she wore the blue scarf, and I nearly snapped. But I held firm, plotting. Mara suggested a public unveiling, a fake exhibition where Julian's inspirations would be exposed side by side with his sculptures. It would humiliate him and force Elise to see her lover's fraudulence. The cruelty thrilled me, but I needed more. The plan crystallized over weeks. Mara and I crafted an event, a celebration of local artists, hosted at Elise's gallery. I pitched it to her as a way to boost her career, knowing she'd invite Julian. She was thrilled, unaware I'd funded it through a shell account. The gallery's board loved the idea, and Elise threw herself into planning, her energy masking her secret. I watched her, my love curdling into resolve. She'd betrayed me in the most intimate way, through her art, her soul. Now I'd use that same world to unravel them. Mara secured the evidence. Side-by-side displays of Julian's sculptures and the obscure works he'd mimicked. We'd project them during the event, timed for maximum impact. I also found a critic, Lena, who despised Julian's arrogance. She agreed to write a scathing piece, seeded with our findings, to drop the next day. The gallery would be packed, patrons, artists, press. Julian's reputation would collapse publicly, and Elise would face her lover's ruin in her own space. I tested Elise one last time. Over dinner, I mentioned Julian's work, probing. She gushed about his genius, her eyes distant. I nodded, hiding my fury. The event was days away. I pictured her face when the projections lit up, revealing Julian's fraud. She'd lose her muse, her trust, her standing. My revenge wasn't physical. It was a dismantling of their shared world. As I finalized details with Mara, a cold satisfaction settled in. They'd built their betrayal in clay and sketches. I'd bury it in light and truth. The gallery event loomed 3 days away, and my plan felt like a perfectly drafted blueprint, every line precise. I'd funded the celebration of local artists through a shell account, ensuring Elise and her gallery board saw it as a windfall. She buzzed with excitement, curating pieces, unaware I'd orchestrated it to destroy Julian. Mara, my investigator, finalized the evidence. High-resolution projections of Julian's sculptures beside the obscure works he'd borrowed. The similarities were undeniable. Curves, textures, even signatures in the clay. We'd display them during the event's climax, with Lena, the critic, ready to amplify the scandal in her column. I kept up appearances at home. Elise hummed while arranging flowers for the gallery, her blue scarf draped over a chair. Each side of it twisted the knife deeper. I cooked her favorite lemon risotto, asking about her plans, probing for guilt. "Julian's bringing a new piece," she said, eyes bright. "It's bold, Dan. You'll love it." Her enthusiasm for him burned, but I smiled, nodding. I pictured her face when the truth hit, her muse exposed as a fraud in her own gallery. The cruelty of it steadied me. Mara suggested one final touch, inviting the original artists whose work Julian had mimicked. Two agreed, a reclusive potter from Eugene and a sculptor from Astoria. Their presence would lend authenticity to the accusations, their stories fueling the crowd's outrage. I also secured a tech crew to ensure the projections were seamless. Time to Julian's speech. The gallery, a sleek space with exposed brick and skylights, would become a stage for his downfall. I barely slept, adrenaline coursing. This wasn't just about Elise's betrayal. It was about reclaiming my dignity. They'd woven their intimacy in clay and sketches. I'd unravel it in light and shame. At night, I studied the photos from Julian's studio. Her hands in clay, their laughter. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was a theft of our shared dreams. Elise had always said my architectural designs inspired her paintings, but now she sculpted with him. I'd make her see Julian's true colors, and she'd lose more than a lover. She'd lose her faith in her own judgment. The event was my masterpiece, a revenge crafted with the precision of my drafting table. As I finalized details with Mara, I felt a cold thrill. The trap was set, and Elise and Julian were walking right into it. The gallery glowed under Portland's drizzle, fairy lights casting a warm haze. I arrived early, dressed in a tailored blazer, playing the supportive husband. Elise flitted about, radiant in a black dress, greeting patrons and artists. Julian was there, his silver rings glinting as he shook hands, his new sculpture, a towering abstract of twisted bronze center stage. I nodded at him, my smile a mask. The crowd buzzed. Critics, collectors, local influencers. Lena, the critic, lingered near the bar, her notebook ready. The original artists, the potter and sculptor, stood quietly in a corner, their faces tense. They knew their role. I checked with the tech crew hidden in a back room. The projectors were primed, the slides loaded, Julian's work beside the originals, annotated with dates and sources. Mara gave me a nod from across the room. Everything was ready. Elise caught my eye, waving me over. "Isn't this amazing, Dan?" she said, squeezing my arm. Her scarf, that damned blue scarf, was tied loosely around her neck. I forced a grin, my heart pounding. "It's perfect," I said, and it was for my purposes. The program began with speeches. Elise spoke first, her voice warm, praising the local art scene. Then Julian took the mic, his charm effortless. He gestured to his sculpture, waxing poetic about authenticity and vision. I signaled the tech crew. As he hit his stride, the projectors hummed to life. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Behind Julian, massive images appeared. His sculpture beside a nearly identical piece by the Astoria sculptor, dated years earlier. Then another, his curves mimicking the Eugene potters. The annotations were damning, the evidence clear. Julian faltered, his voice cracking. Elise froze, her face paling. The crowd murmured, phones snapping photos. Lena scribbled furiously. The original artists stepped forward, their voices quiet but firm, confirming the theft. "He never credited us," the potter said. Julian stammered, claiming coincidence, but the room turned cold. Elise's eyes darted to me, confusion and dread flickering. I met her gaze, unflinching. This was only the beginning. The projections looped, each slide a nail in Julian's reputation. Patrons whispered, critics typed. His career was crumbling, and Elise was watching it happen in her own gallery. My revenge wasn't loud. It was a silent, searing blade. The gallery emptied slowly, the air thick with scandal. Julian's sculpture stood like a monument to his disgrace, patrons avoiding it. He lingered, cornered by Lena and a cluster of bloggers, his excuses unraveling. Elise moved through the crowd, her smile brittle, deflecting questions. I stayed back, watching her unravel. She'd built Julian up as a genius, and now her judgment was under scrutiny. The projections had done their work. His reputation was shredded, and her gallery tainted by association. I felt no joy, only a grim satisfaction. Mara slipped me a USB drive with backups of the slides. "Lena's piece drops tomorrow," she whispered. "It'll be brutal." I nodded, pocketing the drive. The critic's article would cement Julian's fall, reaching galleries nationwide. But my focus was Elise. She approached me, her eyes searching. "Dan, did you know about this?" Her voice trembled. I shrugged, feigning surprise. "Shocking, isn't it? You trusted him." The words were a jab, and she flinched. She didn't suspect my role, not yet. But doubt was creeping in, and I wanted it to fester. At home, Elise was quiet, her scarf discarded on the couch. She poured wine, hands unsteady. "I can't believe it," she muttered. "His work, it felt so real." I sat across from her, sipping my drink. People hide things, Elise, even from those closest to them. Her eyes flicked up, but I kept my face neutral. She didn't confess, didn't mention the studio, the clay, the sketches. Her silence fueled my resolve. This wasn't over. I'd exposed Julian, but Elise's betrayal demanded more. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices, to lose the world she'd built with him. I lay awake that night, planning the next phase. Julian's ruin was public, but Elise's was personal. Her gallery was her heart, her identity. I'd target that next, not with lies, but with truth. I'd leak her connection to Julian, not as a lover, but as a curator who championed a fraud. Her professional circle would question her instincts, her credibility. She'd sculpted with him, laughed with him, betrayed me with him. Now, she'd face the consequences in the world she valued most. My revenge was a slow burn, and I was just warming up. The next morning, Lena's article hit like a tidal wave. Headlined "Portland's Prodigy or Plagiarist." It dissected Julian's career with surgical precision, citing the gallery event and the original artist's claims. Social media erupted. Hashtags like #JulianFraud trended, and Elise's gallery was tagged in the fallout. I read the piece over coffee, Elise still asleep upstairs. She'd wake to a nightmare. I'd made sure Lena mentioned the gallery's role in promoting Julian. A subtle jab at Elise's judgment. The art world was small, and whispers spread fast. I acted concerned when Elise saw the article. She sat at the kitchen table, scrolling, her face ashen. "This could ruin us," she whispered. "The gallery, my reputation." I touched her shoulder, my voice soft. "You couldn't have known, right?" She nodded, but her eyes avoided mine. I knew she was thinking of the studio, the clay, the scarf. Her silence was her guilt, and I let it simmer. That afternoon, I met Mara at a diner. She'd spread the slides to other critics, ensuring Julian's scandal reached Seattle and San Francisco. But now we targeted Elise. My plan was delicate. I'd anonymously tip off a rival curator, Tessa, about Elise's close collaboration with Julian. Not an affair, but a professional misstep, curating his work without vetting its origins. Tessa was ambitious, always eyeing Elise's spot on the gallery board. She'd dig, find the studio visits, the sketches, and question Elise's ethics. I gave Mara photos of Elise and Julian at the studio, carefully framed to look professional but intimate. "Leak these to Tessa's circle," I said. Mara raised an eyebrow but complied. The art world thrived on gossip, and this would sting. By evening, Elise's phone buzzed with board members' texts. A donor had pulled funding, citing the scandal. She paced, frantic, blaming Julian. "He lied to me, Dan." I nodded, hiding my role. "Trust is fragile," I said, the words heavy. She didn't confess her betrayal, but her panic was enough for now. Tessa's inquiries would land soon, and Elise's career would teeter. My revenge wasn't about destroying her. It was about stripping away the world she'd chosen over me. She'd feel the betrayal's echo, and I'd watch it break her. Tessa moved faster than I'd expected. By midweek, whispers about Elise's questionable curation circulated. A blog post, thinly veiled, questioned why she championed Julian without due diligence. The photos I'd leaked, Elise and Julian at his studio, her scarf visible, fueled speculation. No one said affair, but the art world didn't need to. Professional negligence was damning enough. Elise came home shaken, her eyes red. Tessa's pushing for a board review, she said. They think I knew about Julian's work. I feigned shock. That's unfair. You trusted him. She nodded, but her hands trembled. The gallery was in chaos. A second donor wavered, and a scheduled exhibit was postponed. Elise spent hours on calls, defending herself. I listened from the study, my blueprints spread out, a pretense of work. Her voice cracked, pleading with the board. Each call chipped away at her confidence, her identity. She'd betrayed me in the studio, sculpting a world with Julian. Now that world was collapsing and I'd engineered it. I felt no guilt, her choices had led us here. I escalated subtly. I sent an anonymous email to a local arts council, suggesting they audit the gallery's recent acquisitions, hinting at oversights in Julian's show. The audit wouldn't find fraud, but it would keep the pressure on Elise, forcing her to justify every decision. Mara reported that Julian had left Portland. His studio shuttered. His absence made Elise's isolation sharper. She'd lost her muse, and now her career dangled by a thread. At dinner, she barely ate, staring at her phone. I don't know how to fix this, she said. I reached for her hand, my touch cold. You'll get through it, I lied. That night, I found her sketchbook open, a new drawing of broken clay shards. It was her pain, etched in pencil. For a moment, I wavered, remembering her laughter, our early years. But then I saw the blue scarf on the dresser, and my resolve hardened. She hadn't confessed, hadn't apologized. She'd chosen Julian's hands over mine, and now she'd face the full cost. The audit loomed, Tessa's review neared, and my final blow was forming. A way to ensure Elise's betrayal haunted her long after the gallery recovered. I wasn't done breaking her world. The Arts Council audit hit Elise's gallery like a slow poison. My anonymous email had worked. Officials arrived unannounced, requesting records of Julian's exhibition and Elise's curation process. She came home frantic, her hair disheveled, the blue scarf nowhere in sight. They're questioning everything, Dan, she said, her voice cracking. If they find any oversight, I could lose my position. I poured her tea, my face a mask of concern. You'll explain it. You trusted Julian, that's all. She nodded, but her eyes were hollow, haunted by the unraveling of her world. I planned this carefully. The audit wouldn't uncover fraud, Julian's plagiarism was his own, but it would expose Elise's lack of due diligence. Tessa, the rival curator, fueled the fire, whispering to board members about Elise's reckless choices. The leaked photos of Elise and Julian at his studio circulated, their professional intimacy now a stain on her reputation. Patrons gossiped, and the gallery's social media bled with snide comments. Elise's confidence, once radiant, crumbled. She spent nights poring over files, preparing defenses, while I worked late in my study, finalizing my endgame. Mara reported that Julian had vanished to Seattle, his career in tatters. His absence sharpened Elise's isolation. She had no muse to lean on, no partner in clay. I felt a flicker of pity, remembering our early days, her laughter over my sketches. But then I'd see her sketchbook, those hands that weren't mine, and my resolve hardened. She'd chosen Julian's world over ours, sculpting her betrayal in stolen moments. Now, I'd ensure she lost more than her job. I'd strip away her creative soul. My final act was forming. A public gesture that would tie her betrayal to her art forever. I tested her one evening, asking about her sketches. Still drawing, I said casual. She flinched, closing her sketchbook. Not much. Too much stress. Her voice was flat, her spark gone. I nodded, hiding my satisfaction. The audit's pressure, Tessa's scheming, and the gallery's fading prestige were my tools. But they weren't enough. I wanted Elise to face her betrayal head-on, to see it reflected in her own work. The art world was her heart, and I'd carve my revenge there, ensuring she'd never paint or cure it without remembering this pain. As I planned the final blow, a cold calm settled. She'd sculpted her lies, I'd sculpt her regret. Weeks passed, and Elise sank deeper into despair. The audit dragged on, board meetings grew tense, and Tessa's influence swelled. Elise's gallery, once a beacon of Portland's art scene, felt like a sinking ship. She barely slept, her hazel eyes dulled by stress. I played the dutiful husband, cooking dinners, offering reassurances, but my words were laced with subtle barbs. You'll rebuild trust, Elise, if they see the real you. She'd nod, missing the edge in my voice. I waited for her to confess, to admit the studio, the clay, the sketches. She never did. Her silence fueled my resolve. I'd exposed Julian, tarnished her career, but she clung to her secrets, protecting her betrayal. I found her sketchbook one night, open to a half-finished drawing of shattered pottery, jagged lines screaming her turmoil. It wasn't enough. I needed her to feel the weight of her choices, not just their fallout. Mara suggested a bold move. A public art installation, anonymous but pointed, that would force Elise to confront her actions. I loved the idea. It would be my final strike, a mirror to her betrayal, displayed in her own world. I contacted a local artist, Nora, through a pseudonym. Nora was known for provocative installations, perfect for my vision. I commissioned a piece for a city plaza near the gallery, funded through another shell account. The concept: a massive sculpture of intertwined hands, one pair delicate, the other rough, cast in cracked clay, with a blue scarf draped across them. Subtle enough to avoid direct accusation, but unmistakable to Elise. The hands would echo her sketches, the scarf her studio visits. A plaque would read, *Trust, fragile as clay. It would be unveiled during a city arts festival, with Elise's gallery invited. I worked with Nora in secret, sending her reference images from Elise's sketchbook, scanned when she wasn't home. Nora didn't know the full story, but she captured the emotion: betrayal, intimacy, ruin. I imagined Elise seeing it, her face crumpling as the crowd admired the work. The art world would praise its raw honesty, oblivious to its truth. She'd know, though. She'd see her betrayal immortalized, her guilt carved in public view. As the festival neared, I felt a grim thrill. Elise's silence had sealed her fate. My revenge would speak louder than her lies ever could. The arts festival transformed Portland's waterfront plaza into a kaleidoscope of color and sound. Booths showcased paintings, music drifted from stages, and crowds milled under a rare sunny sky. Elise's gallery had a booth, a desperate bid to salvage its reputation post-audit. She invited me to join, her voice strained but hopeful. It could help, Dan. A fresh start. I agreed, hiding my anticipation. Nora's installation was set to be unveiled that afternoon, the centerpiece of the festival's sculpture walk. I'd ensured Elise would be there. We arrived together, her arm linked with mine, a fragile attempt at normalcy. The plaza buzzed with artists and patrons, many whispering about the gallery's troubles. Tessa was there, smirking from her own booth, her board review still looming over Elise. I scanned the crowd, spotting Mara near the stage, her nod confirming everything was ready. The installation stood under a tarp, its shape vague but imposing. Elise chatted with a critic, forcing a smile, unaware of what was coming. My pulse quickened. The unveiling began with a speech from the festival director, praising an anonymous donor's vision of truth and vulnerability. The tarp fell, and gasps rippled through the crowd. The sculpture towered, two pairs of hands, one delicate, one rough, entwined in cracked clay, the blue scarf draped across them, its hue vivid against the gray. The plaque gleamed, *Trust, fragile as clay. Elise froze, her breath catching. I watched her, my face neutral. She recognized the hands, the scarf, the echo of her sketches. Her eyes darted to me, wide with dread, but I looked away, feigning interest in the crowd's reaction. Patrons murmured praise, calling it haunting and profound. Critics snapped photos, speculating about the artist's intent. Elise stood rooted, her face pale, as if the sculpture had peeled back her soul. A woman beside her asked if she was okay. "It's striking," Elise managed, her voice barely audible. I leaned in casual. "Reminds me of your work. Those hands you draw." She flinched, her silence deafening. The crowd moved on, but Elise lingered, staring at the scarf, her betrayal now a public monument. My revenge was complete. She'd carry this image forever, her guilt etched in clay and light. The festival ended, but the sculpture's impact lingered. Photos of Nora's installation flooded social media, art blogs dissecting its emotional depth. Elisa's gallery booth drew little attention, overshadowed by the scandal and the sculpture's buzz. She barely spoke on the drive home, her hands clenched in her lap. I didn't push, letting the silence choke her. The blue scarf, left at the gallery, never reappeared. She knew I'd seen the truth, though she hadn't confessed. Her guilt was her prison now, and I'd built it with precision. The audit concluded days later, clearing the gallery of fraud but citing curatorial oversights. Elise kept her position, but the board sidelined her, giving Tessa more control. Donors hesitated, and the gallery's next exhibit flopped. Elisa's spark was gone. She stopped painting, her sketchbook untouched. I watched her unravel, a shadow of the woman who'd laughed over coffee. I felt no triumph, only a hollow resolve. She'd sculpted her betrayal in Julian's studio. I'd sculpted her punishment in public clay. I met Mara one last time at a quiet cafe. She handed me a flash drive with all our evidence, photos, emails, the installation plans. "You're done?" she asked. I nodded. "It's enough." I'd dismantled Julian's career, tarnished Elise's, and etched her betrayal into her world. Mara warned that Elise might suspect my role, but I didn't care. Let her wonder. The sculpture was my signature, anonymous but unmistakable. She'd see it every time she passed the plaza, its hands and scarf a mirror to her choices. At home, Elise tried to rebuild. She suggested a weekend away, her voice fragile. "We need this, Dan." I agreed, but my heart was stone. I'd loved her once, but her betrayal had redrawn me. The installation was permanent, a city landmark now. She'd never escape it, nor the whispers about her judgment, her gallery, her muse. My revenge wasn't loud. It was eternal, woven into Portland's art scene. As we packed for the trip, I glanced at her sketchbook, still closed. She'd lost her art, her trust, her world, and I'd made sure of it. Months passed, and our marriage became a quiet ritual. Meals shared, words sparse. Elise threw herself into saving the gallery, but her efforts faltered. Tessa's influence grew, and Elisa's role shrank to administrative tasks, her curatorial voice silenced. She didn't paint, didn't sketch. The sculpture in the plaza, now a tourist draw, haunted her. I'd see her pause when we passed it, her eyes tracing the hands, the scarf. She never mentioned it, but her silence screamed guilt. I'd won, but victory tasted like ash. I took a new project, designing a community center, pouring myself into lines and angles. Elise and I coexisted, our love a ghost. One evening, she broke the silence, her voice trembling. "Dan, did I lose you?" I looked at her, the woman who'd sculpted with Julian, who'd drawn hands that weren't mine. "You lost yourself," I said, and walked away. She didn't follow. I didn't expect her to. The truth hung between us, unspoken but heavy. She'd betrayed me, and I'd repaid it with a cruelty she'd never forget. The art world moved on, but Elise didn't. Julian resurfaced in obscurity, his name a footnote. The gallery limped along, a shadow of its past. Nora's sculpture, my silent revenge, stood firm, its plaque a quiet accusation. Friends asked why we stayed together. I had no answer. Maybe I wanted her to live with the weight, to see me thrive while she withered. Maybe I couldn't let go of the pain. Either way, I'd crafted a punishment that outlived the betrayal. Years later, I saw Elise at an art fair, alone, her eyes scanning a student's sketches. The spark was gone, replaced by a weary resignation. I passed the plaza that day, the sculpture unchanged, its scarf faded but stark. A tourist read the plaque, asterisk, trust, fragile as clay, asterisk. I smiled faintly. Elise would never confess, but she'd never forget. My revenge was eternal, not in anger, but in memory. A monument to her betrayal, carved in her world, binding her to the hands she'd chosen and the trust she'd broken. I walked on, my blueprint complete.